She wasn't, Darcy wasn't sure she was going to be able to make it. She was going, someone was cancer treatments. Yeah.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started. Welcome to the City Council meeting of February 13th, 2023.
Recording in progress.
Welcome, everybody, again to our City Council meeting of February 13th, 2023. At this point, I'd like to ask the city clerk to please call the roll.
Councilor Runyon,
Present.
Councilor Richardson,
Present.
Councilor Randall,
Present.
Councilor McLaughlin.
Present.
Believe Councilor Long is going to be joining us via Zoom. Mayor Mays.
Present. I'd like to ask our Councilor Tim McLaughlin to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilor. There has been a slight change in tonight's agenda. Item 14 is an executive session. Apparently, we will not be having an executive session, so I would ask for a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Mayor, you're adding a consent agenda item as well?
Oh, yes, we're also asking, adding a consent agenda item, which would be 9C, which is approval of one of my appointments. So I would ask for a motion to approve the agenda as amended with adding item 9C and deducting the executive session.
I'll move we adopt the agenda as amended.
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Councilor Richardson and seconded by Councilor Randall to move to approve the agenda as amended. Is there any questions or discussion? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item 5, we have 3 presentations tonight, and I would ask in the interest of time, because we do have a very long agenda, that all 3 just come right up and introduce yourselves and your title, and we'll get right into it. So the first one is I'd like to call Taylor Pointer up here from Jacobs to give us a presentation on what's going on with our wastewater treatment plant. Welcome, Taylor.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you, everyone, for having me here today. I'm Taylor Pointer. I'm the area manager for the wastewater treatment facility. I oversee the wastewater treatment plant here as well as Hood River. I've had the honor of working in the Dalles for the last year. But Jacobs overall has had the honor of working in the Dalles for the past 34 years. So they got me beat. I'm here today to present on our prior year contract annual report from July 2021 to June 2022. So I just want to touch on some of the highlights from this prior year, including how we were operating the facility consistently below permitted requirements, how we improved and got creative with our biosolids management program, and how we utilized technology to enhance our operations. So for operating below permitted requirements, in wastewater treatment, we need to meet limits on BOD, TSS, and E. coli, as many of you know. And BOD is biochemical oxygen demand, TSS is total suspended solid. So before we get into that, I just want to show you guys what was coming into the plant this past year. We had an average of 2.6 million gallons per day coming in, with a monthly average max in January of 3.1 million gallons per day. So on the biochemical oxygen demand front, this is one of our primary pollutants that we're worried about treating. We were in the single digits on our average effluent for the year. Coming in though, we had around 180 milligrams per liter. Going out, we had around 8 milligrams per liter. So I ran the numbers for you, and the math on that is a 96% treatment efficiency, which is pretty stellar. So this is well below our limits, our seasonal limits of 20 and 30 milligrams per liter for dry season and wet season respectively. For TSS, we had an influent of around 180 milligrams per liter, similar to BOD, and our effluent was around 8 milligrams per liter going back out. So that's still that 96% treatment efficiency, again, well below our permitted requirements of 20 milligrams per liter and 30 milligrams per liter. For E. coli, we have a geometric mean requirement of 126 colonies per 100 milliliters. That's our maximum for geometric mean. Our annual geometric mean was in the single digits at 8.2 colonies per 100 milliliters. So again, we were well below those limits from July 2021 to June 2022. The second item I want to highlight is how we improved and got creative with the biosolids management program. So our biosolids management program is a super beneficial partnership between the city and the local farmers of the Dalles. We provide them with a nutrient-rich product, a fertilizer, for free. And in turn, we can have a beneficial reuse of one of our byproducts, which is the solid stream within wastewater. So here at the Dalles, we thicken our biosolids. We don't dewater. So that means our biosolids is in liquid form at around 3%. If we dewatered, it would probably be more around 18% solids or so. So we are moving a lot of water whenever we land apply. This water takes up a lot of space, as you can imagine. So that's where getting creative comes in. This past year, we hauled more than 2.9 million gallons of liquid biosolids. This is up by 1 million gallons from the prior contract year. Due to that creativity that I mentioned, we typically have one person that hauls biosolids to the field, loads off into the trailer and tractor combo, and then spreads that load. Then they go back to the wastewater plant and start all over. They can typically get 5 to 6 loads in a long day, but that wasn't cutting it for what we needed. We really needed storage capacity this past year, so we instituted what I call a haulorama, where we have 3 of our operators working in conjunction. So we'll have 2 truck drivers staggered. One person will be loading biosolids at the facility, and the other will be actually at the field offloading their load. And then that person in the tractor is spreading the load. And by the time they're done, the next person's already there. So that's really allowed us to clear capacity within our digesters and give us more space. So when weather comes around, wet weather or winter weather, we can have more space to waste and continue our treatment process. So we're currently caught up this year due to those holoramas, but we did have some setbacks. The January 2022 snowstorm, if you guys recall, that was my first day, January 1st, 2nd. And we had a lot of snow coming, and that set back our biosolids spreading by 4 weeks or so. So in addition to that, we had wet weather prior to that. So the fields were wet. We weren't able to apply as much as we would have liked. So storage was building up. We were approaching capacity on all of our storage options at the facility. So what we did was we acquired some Baker tanks. They're essentially just, we acquired Baker tanks that essentially hold 17,000 gallons of biosolids cumulatively, and that only bought us about 5 days of process time. But it was really beneficial while we were trying to brainstorm other creative solutions. The thing that came to mind was we have a facility just downriver that Jacobs operates as well, Hood River's facility, and they have a dewatering process. So we were actually able to coordinate with them, and we were able to dewater 101,000 gallons of biosolids. That bought us nearly a month of time back for a treatment process, and it's hugely beneficial for us. And it was a really cool opportunity to work in conjunction with our neighbors downstream and work with another Jacobs facility on coming up with a cool solution. Finally, we enhanced our operations through a new data program called Hawk Wins. So it's essentially just a repository for all our facility information. Any lab data will enter in there the same day, any process data, permitted data for DEQ. It's a record for all our process and compliance data. It's a really cool means of being able to track everything and then develop trends and graphs and key performance indicators to see what's happening at the plant and catch anything before something goes wrong. So we're taking a proactive approach as opposed to a reactive approach. And Excel's great for that too, but this is basically a wastewater operator's dream because it's built around wastewater operations and it lets you play with different functions associated with that. Breeze through that. Questions?
Any questions for Taylor?
Yeah, I have one. Is there a charge for the biosolid that you move out to the farms?
No, so we do not charge the farmers anything, no.
And that biosolid is used for fertilizer?
Yep. Absolutely. So it's a Class B biosolids.
There was a time when methane capturing off from the waste coming up, that there was a plan to collect that and turn that back into electricity. Is how are we looking on that?
That's definitely something we're looking to improve upon our process. We do have an operator who is certifying in that microturbine course associated with it. It's taking a lot of effort on our side, but it's going to be worth it when we can get it up and running appropriately.
Right.
But we do use natural gas to run our boiler too. So there's definitely lots of opportunities for these beneficial side streams that we can recapture.
Thank you.
I have a question. The Hood River facility has a dewatering capability. Are you, is there any chance for the Dalles to get a dewatering capability?
Actually in our contract negotiations. So I'm sure we'll be speaking to that more in the future here.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Hiring has become a problem everywhere. How are you guys at the treatment plant doing with your hiring?
So we don't have any open positions right now, which I consider a big win. Can't say the same for folks down in Hood River. But we're doing pretty okay. I think we're able to get folks that live within the area. As you guys know, there's a responsibility that everyone's on call within 30 minutes of the treatment plant. So we've been able to keep staff on hand at least.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Appreciate it, everyone.
Next on the agenda, 5B is a presentation on Project Turnkey from Kenny Lapointe. Kenny?
Good evening, Mayor Mays, members of the council. For the record, I'm Kenny Lapointe, the Executive Director of Mid-Columbia Community Action Council. Unfortunately, my computer will not hook up to the internet and stay connected. I know you have a copy of my presentation in your packet as well that was sent out to the council. As you all know, I'm here tonight to talk about Project Turnkey, and I'm going to give folks a little bit of a reminder of who we are, so we can just sort of level set it. So Mid-Columbia Community Action Council is the community action agency that serves Hood River, Wasco, and Sherman counties. Community action agency in every area of the state of Oregon and most areas of the country. 18 in Oregon, we're the one that serves the 3 county areas that include Wasco County as well as Hood River and Sherman County. We provide utility assistance, bill pay assistance, household utility assistance through our bill pay program. We weatherize homes of low-income households. We provide housing assistance in a variety of forms, homeless prevention, trying to keep people in their homes, housing case management services, outreach services, homeless services as well. As you know, we are the operator of the pallet shelter site here in the Dalles and have been so for about 2 years now. We also operate a 26-bed shelter, pallet shelter site in Hood River that operates from November to March of it. And we've been operating the pallet shelter site here, which is 34 beds year round since we took over in January of 2020. Our primary funding sources are state and federal funding. And our mission is to build a better future for our community through partnership and equity-centered programs that prevent and eliminate poverty and houselessness. I mentioned sort of our core program areas. Mentioned shelter, a big thing that we do here. Since we started providing shelter in the region again, around the beginning of January of 2021, we were able to increase the number of available shelter bed nights from around 5,000 shelter bed nights a year to over 13,000 shelter bed nights a year in the region. That's region wide. Many of those shelter beds are available. We have that pallet shelter that runs around. Now, Project Turnkey is a program, which is what I'm here to talk to you about. It's 2.0, so we're sort of second round of Project Turnkey. Project Turnkey is a program that was funded by the Oregon legislature and is administered by the Oregon Community Foundation. The Oregon Community Foundation is just what it sounds like. They're a foundation that provides grants to nonprofit organizations across the state of Oregon. Project Turnkey was designed to allow communities to quickly acquire hotels or motels that could be converted into shelter or transitional affordable housing. So it was designed to get units on the ground very quickly. I believe Turnkey 1.0 funded around 13 hotels across the state of Oregon. 2.0 will do just about the same. And we are one of the first ones in 2.0 to receive funding. So we just closed on the Oregon Motor Motel just a couple weeks ago, which is a 54-room hotel down on the west side of 2nd Street. Right across the street from the post office. And it's sort of got two sections there. There's some pictures in your packet. I wanted to make sure folks were able to see sort of the original state of the Oregon Motor Motel, which is actually has a very cool sort of retro feel to it. Current condition of the facility is not anything to be very proud of, I would say. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our plans for the site, but it definitely needs quite a bit of work. It's in a bit of disrepair. I'll go into that a little bit further into my presentation, but I wanted to sort of talk about some of the partnerships and what we're planning on doing from an operations standpoint. Mid-Columbia Community Action will be overseeing the operations of the Project Turnkey facility with our shelter and housing team. We're also partnering with multiple other organizations who will both be placing clients at the site and be providing on-site services at the site. Those project partners include the Oregon Human Development Corporation, which is a culturally specific organization that serves agricultural workers in the Latinx community throughout the region. They actually have an office over on 4th Street. Mid-Columbia Center for Living, which, as you all know, is our region's behavioral health provider. Ichiwana Housing, which is a culturally specific housing provider that serves the Native community, many of the Native community members that live along at the in-lieu sites, and they both serve in Washington and Oregon. Next Door, a culturally responsive organization that provides services to a variety of household types, including families with children, agricultural workers, the Latinx community, the Native community. Great organization, has a great reputation in the community. Columbia Gorge Health Council and the Bridges to Health Pathways program. Columbia Gorge Health Council is the joint governing body for our region's coordinated care organization, which helps to administer Medicaid dollars households throughout the community. Mid-Columbia Medical Center, One Community Health, our federally qualified health center, and then Providence Health System. From an operations and staffing standpoint, I mentioned that we have 54, there's 54 rooms at this hotel. We're not planning to occupy them all with individuals or households. We're actually going to be converting some of those rooms to service centers. So we'll have staff in there that will be doing case management out of those rooms. We've located each of those. We're planning to locate each of those staffing rooms at the ends of the buildings. So each end unit will be a case management room. We also will have 2 on-site resident managers who will live in the 2 apartments that exist in the buildings. Many of you know there's sort of a west side to the property, and then there's an east side. So the west side faces Montiras, and the east side is right along 2nd Street as you're coming out of town. The west side will be focused on serving families with children. We currently do not have any family shelter in our region at all. And I will say our strategy for serving families with children has actually been to place them in the Oregon Motor Motel. So as recently as our point in time count, which is when I have a point in time snapshot of how many folks were housed in hotels, with most of them being in the Oregon Motor Motel, we had 30 households. Again, mostly in Oregon Motor. So we've used hotels as sort of overflow capacity for our shelter system, with a focus on families with children, those who are coming out of hospitalization and require a more contained environment with access to their own restroom, than those who are fleeing domestic violence. We're also planning on having a couple of the hotel rooms become laundry rooms and lounges for clients to utilize laundry facilities. These are clients who would be staying there. It's not be open to the general public. I mentioned the on-site resident managers. Will also have housing stabilization staff from our agency and other agencies there throughout every day from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. At 10 p.m., again, we'll still have on-site managers who live in the apartments there. From 10 p.m. to 8 a.m., we'll have on-site security 5 days a year monitoring on the site. Some of the philosophies that we'll be running the facility off of. So transitional shelter is kind of the term we're using to describe this. And that's really how we've run our pallet shelter site to date. And I know there may be some confusion around what is transitional shelter and what is emergency shelter. So emergency shelter is really focused on a 12-hour period where you may have inclement weather, super hot. You want to provide shelter for 12 hours. We have not done that actually at Mid-Columbia Community Action. We have not done that at our pallet shelter site since we took over in January of 2020. Really became a transitional shelter, which means stay there for up to 6 months, as long as they were working on a housing. So we have run that shelter, the pallet shelter, that way, and that is how we're running the project. We know that folks need longer stability than 12 hours. Providing folks with ongoing case management services has allowed us to be really successful long-term housing. In fact, in 2022, our shelter site here in the Dalles placed 79 individuals in permanent housing out of that shelter. We believe that is because we have the transitional model, also because we require folks to have a case management goal of getting into permanent housing. 6-month mark, they need to be ready. Behavior-based rules and guidelines for all of our clients. So we don't allow drugs or alcohol on our sites. We don't allow fighting. We don't allow weapons. We conduct room inspections every day, 2 o'clock every single day. Again, all clients working towards permanent housing placement. We are regularly coordinating with community partners. So we have culturally specific partners come out to our site. Center for Living is out on the pallet shelter site almost every day. And we also have One Community Health who comes out to the site every Tuesday and provides physical health services at the pallet shelter site. And that will continue to happen at the Turney site. We will also be having all of our clients sign good neighbor agreements, which basically means they will interact within the community surrounding the facility in a way that is respectful of all the neighbors. And if they are not interacting in that way, then we will have a pathway to report to our shelter management team that we can address those issues. We won't put up. From a staff training standpoint, all of our staff are trained, all of our shelter staff and housing staff are trained in trauma-informed care, mental health first aid, de-escalation techniques, housing first principles, which is really that principle that we're trying to get folks into housing, permanent housing as quickly as possible. Our staff are trained in CPR and cultural competence and communication. We're also working to get some of our staff to become certified peer support workers and community. I kind of mentioned a lot of the services that are provided from a funding standpoint. We will be basically transitioning our current pallet shelter operations to this site. Again, it's transitional shelter. We'll be moving our clients into this better infrastructure facility. Say that we've been super grateful to be able to run pallet shelter site. From an infrastructure standpoint, it is not phenomenal. We're working out of an RV on a day-to-day basis. We have 6 to 7 staff that are working there all the time. We have a lot of elderly clients that are walking around on gravel. We have clients in wheelchairs that can't get around very well. A third of our clients at the pallet shelter site are seniors. They have to get up in the middle of the night if they need to use the restroom facilities and walk outside to our shower trailer. Again, we're super grateful to have a resource for those clients, but it will be much better to have folks in a contained indoor environment, less institutional, and has better facilities access. Many of our partners are contributing funding to this project as well. I don't know if anyone knows this, but a lot of community organizations place their clients who are experiencing homelessness or housing unstable, they place them into local hotels. So the local hotels are being used as sort of a makeshift transitional shelter. We went to all those partners and have basically pooled them together and said, instead of throwing money into hotels like you are, put the money together, let's support the operations of one site together and we can all bring services there. But we're not just relying on hotel management, we're also on site constantly. I mentioned that we're going to be doing a lot of renovations on the property. Anywhere from $1.2 to $1.5 million in renovations will go into that facility. Those renovations were funded by the Oregon Community Foundation. Well, during the process of acquiring the site, we received a bunch of bids on cost, and I let the foundation know that if they would not support the renovation of the facility, we would not be willing to take it. I want to make sure that this is an asset to the community, beautifies the entry to downtown, and we believe that we will be able to do that. Starting tomorrow, we'll be replacing the roof, which shouldn't actually even still be on there. We will be painting, doing new stucco, new heating and air conditioning units in 39 of the rooms, bathroom fans, new water heaters, which the facility did not have capacity to even serve rooms that were there in the first place. We'll be tearing out the west parking lot, including the pool. Be redoing that whole parking lot, adding some parking spaces over there. We're going to be adding accessibility to 2 of the rooms on the east side so that folks can get in with wheelchairs. I mentioned we have a couple clients in our shelter that are in wheelchairs. It's not easy on gravel and into rooms that have sort of stepping. Also be doing some new railings and posts and redecking all the walk. I included in your packet the website, the webpage that we have set up on our website. We have this for our navigation center project as well, but we have a webpage for Project Turnkey. Annex is what we're calling it. That includes all the information on our operations plans, who will be serving, what the rules and guidelines of the facility are, basically frequently asked questions. We're happy to add to that as we get more questions that may. Really, our goal here is to create a housing continuum. Right now, we have bits and pieces. Emergency shelter is definitely essential to provide safety for folks. Does not provide long-term stability. Additional shelter is necessary to provide sort of interim stability as we work to get folks into permanent housing. Again, 79 individuals went from our shelter, 34-bed shelter, into permanent housing in 2020. We want to make sure that we continue to do that. That is sort of our continuum, is to go from emergency shelter to transitional shelter to permanent housing. Permanent housing is the solution to houselessness, is not shelter. Gives you a 1 night or 6-month stay, and then the long term, you're going to have folks who go back into homelessness because that shelter is no longer available. We are providing those services to get folks into that permanent. The last thing I wanted to mention before I go to questions is just that we are going to be doing a groundbreaking of our navigation center projects, March 24th from 11 to noon. Invites went out last week. If you didn't get one, please let me know and I can make sure. That is at 2505 West. Happy to answer.
Does anybody on the city council have any questions for Mr. Lapointe? Mr. Richardson, Councilor Richardson.
Good evening, Kenny. Thanks for being here tonight. Just, I've got several. I am curious, you put 79 people into permanent housing. Where are you finding rentals or homes for these folks? It's a very tight market.
Our housing case managers do a really good job of networking. They're out there talking to local landlords. We've provided some incentive programs for landlords to access if they're willing to rent to folks who are coming out of the shelter. So we're giving a landlord $500 cash incentive, not a security deposit. Give that too, but a cash incentive just for them to rent to folks. We have been doing that. So that has been a very effective tool in getting local landlords to be willing to rent to some of our. And then we've also found some property managers who have been extremely grateful for the program. Some of them experienced homelessness themselves at one point in their life and were very interested in participating as a landlord. In fact, I get emails on a weekly basis almost from a lot different than trying to track land down. We are providing ongoing case management, so we will go back in and we place someone to make sure that things are.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a couple?
Absolutely.
Well,
Go ahead.
thanks. Let's talk facilities for a minute, if you don't mind. You have sort of an impressive or ambitious expansion of sheltering facilities besides the pellet shelter, NAV Center opening up, the annex, the Hamilton, correct? Are there others that you have on your, I don't know, strategic plan or in mind or coming along?
Right now, we have a couple other permanent housing facilities that we're hoping to get state funding for. I mean, these are multi-family apartment complexes. Westgate Market over on Chenoweth Loop is hopefully going to be permanent housing at some point. One of our development partners owns that site, and we're working on an application right now that would potentially bring up to 75 new multifamily apartments to the region, which our region not here. So that's one. Reliant on state funding to get that done, and we're applying for tax credits for that. You have the Navigation Center, you have Project Turnkey, and then we're working with Hood River to try and identify funding for a satellite nav.
Navigation Center will have emergency shelter, Project Turnkey, or the annex will have transitional shelter. I guess I was under the impression that both flavors of shelter would be at the Navigation Center. Was that a misunderstanding on my part or sort of a change it off?
So
Change in
originally we
plan.
were planning on the Navigation Center having transitional shelter. Longer term, but now that we have access to a better facility for that transitional shelter, it was a good opportunity for us to look at what we were doing. And I think everyone is aware that there has been an emergency. There is not currently an emergency shelter that exists in Dalles at all. Significant need for shelter, emergency shelter overnight. We saw that as an opportunity for us to build that into our continuing services. It's not going to be a site that operates without rules. I want to be very clear that I'm not operating anything like what it.
What's the plan for the pellet shelter site village?
So the pallet shelters, once the Navigation Center is sort of getting constructed, the pallet shelters will move to that site. And that's where they will stay, and they will be providing weather-based shelter. Cooling center space for folks. Had one of the hottest areas in the world the last. Cooling center space or overnight emergency. And that's a gap that is. Want to make sure we provide that. Had folks who are even housed who they didn't have heat at home to need access to.
May I ask a question of our city manager? Just generally speaking, Matthew, what kind of calls, response time, police, et cetera, are we, the city, putting into or devoting or having to send to the pellet shelter now?
I may look to our police chief who's in the audience as well, but I believe the response that's been called down to the pallet shelter has been borderline zero for lack of a better term. But chief, do you have a comment there?
This is Chief Tom Worthy, our police chief here in the Dalles.
Question. The question is really about the volume of calls and the police pallet shelters. The city manager mentioned it's been virtually nil. So well-run. I've been out there on a couple of occasions. One to show a former client on the property, another for a guy that was just having a moment, and then so outside those infrequent occurrences, we just are not out of.
And that is transitional. That is transitional shelter, transitional housing, which
Transitional shelter. It's up to 6 months stay.
Yeah.
So it's no longer than 6 months. Nobody's paying anything for their stay. So transitional housing would assume that there's some sort of lease arrangement.
I guess my line of questioning goes to, is the pellet shelter essentially a good analog for what you're proposing to run at the Oregon Motor Motel?
Essentially it is. It's the same sort of operation that we've been running there. It's just better infrastructure.
Yeah.
Clients get their own restroom. And I mentioned a third of our clients out there cannot get around. Well, I worked the site on Christmas this year. As y'all remember, we had an ice storm over Christmas. I spent the whole day packing up ice so my elderly clients would not fall for themselves. Wouldn't have. The facility is just not suitable for folks who are working to stabilize, get into better health condition, stay clean. It's just not. It works, right? But it's more like a camp that you put out in a field where you have some portable restroom. Yeah, we appreciate the ability to use that site. Our 79 clients that transition housing, they appreciate it. Tonight they're safe.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, sir. I was just going to ask one more of the chief.
Oh, yeah, well, that's what I want to do too. So go ahead.
Sorry to put you on the spot, Chief Worthy, but do you have any, or I should say, do you have significant concerns about this facility going in?
Mayor Mays, members of the council, thank you for that question. I don't have significant concerns because I recognize and I've seen the model that's in place at our current shelters with better facility and staff. It's important to note that many of the people staying at the Oregon Motor Motel now are people who are in that sort of at risk or needy clientele base. And so with them being there with on-site management and advocates, counselors and security overnight, I'm less concerned.
Thank you.
The question I was going to ask was specifically in light of the fact that Mid-Columbia Community Action is currently housing people at this particular hotel. What has been the police response and number of calls there presently?
We've been to the Oregon Motor Motel on various calls, probably not more than ILO or any other rate in town. Hotels as transient housing and lodging, just occasionally are the folks calls for us, but in this case, not any more than any other. It's right around the corner. Our response time will be a lot quicker.
Thank you. Any other questions for Chief Worthy while he's up here? Okay, thanks, Chief. Any other questions for Mr. Lapointe? Council Runyon.
As you know, and there are different elements to people that are homeless. That's for sure. And we see all levels here in this community. And my background was on the Community Action Board for well over a decade. The last 8 of it, I was probably chair 4 or 5 years of it. So I'm sensitive to a lot of the programs and helped start a lot of the programs, but I'm very concerned about the entry to our city. For the better part of the last year, concerted effort went on to where the St. Vincent de Paul board finally said enough was enough about Pentland Street, right beside our Chamber of Commerce. You know, the city has nothing to do with this facility. I just worry greatly about the look coming into our community. And I know you're going to work hard initially, but I can see things may level down a little bit as you go along. And I just want a very high bar set on cleanliness and keeping the property and the people on the property, within the rules of our community and not be a danger to our community as well. I know we need to help people, but some people are just at a point. I hope where do they go when they get out of the program? That's another question. You know, if they're not following the rules and they're creating piles of garbage or whatever that might be going on and you're cleaning that up immediately, I know, but where do they go then? I mean, they go across the street again? I mean, you have any plans along? There's a lot of questions right there. And I know this audience has those questions.
I mean, I would say when it comes to where do people go, at that point in time, they've become a safety issue for the community. And we have to make decisions that are tough. And the decision is to, if we're going to exclude somebody from the site, that is a decision that they have made themselves at that point in time. We can't fix everything. I'm not going to fix the problem that exists. That's not what you are probably going to continue to see that problem. So I'm not. From a set the standards aspect, standards are pretty low right now. So that facility is in very bad shape. Probably close to not even being able to operate. It needs to be rehabbed very significantly. Again, we will be doing that rehab starting tomorrow is our first work is going to be going. Not going to guarantee that folks are going to stay on our site because we're integrating them into the community. These are community members just like all of us are. We want them integrated. We want them working within the community. We have shelter clients right now that are working that can't find permanent housing, and we're working to identify that. A third of the clients are disabled. A third of the clients are seniors. So we want to make sure that they're interacting. That's what's going to give them hope that we all care enough for them to be successful members of our.
My main point was I wanted that vocalized. Okay. I want the citizens to feel like they have somebody they can depend on. And, it's going to be hard. It's going to be very hard for a lot of our businesses, whatnot, are coming forward at regular intervals the last few weeks,
Yeah, I think it's been hard for all of us. It's been hard on our team. I mean, this is not an easy issue. It's probably the #1 issue in the country. Homelessness and a lack of available housing. And we're stepping up to try and make a difference. I know that we already have.
One other question, maybe two, Mayor. The Hamilton. All this money coming and everything, was there a thought about just building where you were already running a shelter?
So the Hamilton is permanent housing.
Yeah.
So, that is a different type of housing. We can't use any of the funding that we have received.
But you couldn't have built on that land?
No, Project Turnkey is for the the acquisition of existing hotels
And
building. I will also note that the Hamilton site, has potential environmental happen on the facility, as well as a billboard.
one other follow-up to that. The Hamilton at one time was two veterans units, and then that expanded. Is that still the case?
Hamilton is entirely. all
Okay.
10 Units in the Hamilton serve, not homeless anymore because now they've been housed. So they're formerly homeless veterans that are there. And the Project Turnkey site will also have a set aside of.
Okay, you had not mentioned that in your program. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So again, I mentioned all of our service partners. They all have populations that they specialize in serving, whether it's Native community members, agricultural workers, migrant and seasonal farm workers who are coming in for cherry harvest. We have a supportive services for veteran families program that provides services to veterans and their families. Many of the veterans in the Hamilton are served by that program. We have over 30 veterans who are on that program right now. We are housing veterans in hotels throughout the Dalles with those programs resources. So this will allow us to provide shelter, transitional shelter that we own, case management on the site.
The only other comment I have is that how do we replace those taxes we're losing on that building?
That's outside of my.
Not sure we're receiving a whole lot of transit rental tax off of the water end right now. Any other questions, Council Runyon? Council Randall?
Yes. You mentioned the west end parking lot was going to be like demolishing the swimming pool that was there and restructuring or reconfiguring it somehow. Is that going to keep I think there's an outlet that comes out right kind of at the stop sign there, I believe. And I don't know, do you anticipate like an increased amount of vehicle traffic coming in and out of that parking lot? And will that be a problem at that's kind of a weird spot there where you got three flows of traffic coming together?
Right. Yeah, I'd have actually had a conversation or two with Josh Chandler around making sure that entry and exit really noted in that parking lot. It is noted in there, but you can't read it. You want to make sure that that is identified in the parking lot. Traffic coming in the wrong way, traffic is going. We will be removing the pool, which it doesn't work anymore. None of that stuff out there. We will be putting up another fence around that side so it won't be exposed to the street. So our plan is that access through.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I was thinking of asking the audience if they had any questions, but in the interest of time, what I think I'm going to do is, Mr. LaPointe, would you be willing to stick around outside and answer questions from people that might have some questions?
Sure.
Okay, I appreciate that. And also, I want to point out that under audience participation, item 6 on the agenda, if anybody has any comments as opposed to questions, you're welcome to come up and speak your piece about anything that's not on the agenda tonight. Okay? Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. We're going to take a 2-minute break to allow the room to vacate if you're interested. 2 minutes, guys.
Kenny went back to the state 6 months, a year ago. Who's gonna run it then? Who have his drive? You know, I do. I'm wondering if we can. Got some Cracker Jacks. Let's put our guys on it and say, some of the long-term, I mean, we don't get a say on it. But we could maybe work with them to like make sure there's not a
No, he's
Brought up driveways there.
been down in the audience. already.
As you come this way, come to the pool, there's a driveway here. And then there's a driveway here where people are coming to that stop sign.
Yeah.
Turn.
Kind of a
You
blind.
could block
Yes,
that.
you
Yeah.
One
That's what I was
way.
wondering.
They don't need to have.
But
a
it's
That's what you see, like you were saying, when you come to town, that's what you see. You look right in that parking lot. There's an outlet right there.
Not very.
I've never seen a whole lot of traffic.
Questions about.
I'm just wondering if,
Don't
is
lean into it. So.
it gonna be an increase in traffic?
Just to give you.
That good?
So here's
Should
the.
We were.
Tax amount.
Let's be consistent.
Boy, I'm glad she told me to print out of that. I've never done that. It wouldn't even occur to me.
Half of that is just. to the east.
Grab one for you.
Right.
Oh, really? I tried myself. and She was able to get up. I tried again. It's like, oh, no joy.
Yeah, but I wonder if that west end was built later.
They were-
It looks like that was an add-on.
Confusing.
On me.
My mind is.
Filled in
You
you have events. You know,
Imagine, like you said, about this
just
hazmat, you know.
ceremonial. I saw native use
Didn't even build
and religious. Okay. Events. Okay, you have alcohol.
Dan, is there a copy?
Alcohol. So
It is, yes, there is.
tobacco at the
That has
same
coffee in
time,
it.
permit.
Sure, feels like it.
But anyway, yes. But during the day, have down there doing vaping and because the police chief, I was in his office when he showed me. And he says, look there, and he did run over there and confront that guy. And he was doing illegal. I don't know if it was crack or. Anyway. That's the reason why they're here.
Zed, are you ready to roll? Yep.
It's not a big.
Okay, we're gonna reconvene. We're gonna reconvene now and we'll move on to item 6, which is audience participation.
Oh, there's one more presentation.
Whoa, I forgot Neita. She's sitting there right in front of me. Neita Cecil from the North Central Public Health Department, talking about the no smoking, vaping at Lewis and Clark Park. Please proceed. Your name and title, please.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks for having me, Mayor and Council. My name is Neita Cecil, and I am the Tobacco Prevention Coordinator for North Central Public Health District. That's not too much. And I am here tonight to ask that the city, sorry, I should mention that I did have a presentation for you, but I wasn't like the previous presenter. I wasn't able to get it to work for me. So I'm just reading off a paper copy of it. And the health district is asking that an ordinance be passed to have the Lewis and Clark Festival Park become a tobacco and vape-free property. And while I'm the only person speaking before you tonight, we do have a considerable amount of backers for this proposal, including Youth Think, the local organization that works to prevent drug and alcohol use by our local youth, and by Northern Wasco County Parks and Recreation District, Northern Wasco County School District 21, the Dalles Area Chamber of Commerce, and then Dan Spots, who's a former city councilor, and his wife, Michelle. And also we have support from Marilyn Wong, who's with the American Cancer Society here. And why we're asking for this policy or this ordinance is that while we've come a long way in reducing smoking in the United States, it is still the #1 cause of preventable death in the country. And there's 480,000 people a year die due to smoking. And regionally, just last year, tobacco use had a pretty significant, not only personal cost and death and illness, but also a cost in medical care and lost productivity. And then about 14.8% of adults in our 2 counties that we serve, which is Wasco and Sherman counties, are still smoking. And over 40% of them tried to quit last year. So that's a pretty standard figure that about, almost half of smokers attempt to quit regularly. And also with our focus, we really look to the youth and trying to keep kids from starting this habit. But in Wasco County, over a quarter of 11th graders have used e-cigarettes on a regular basis. And that's from 2020 data. And this is a statewide statistic. In 2019, over half of 8th grade smokers and over half of 11th grade smokers had already tried to quit. So they're still in school and they're addicted and they can't quit. And so it's a very powerful addiction, and we want to try to keep them from getting there in the first place. And a lot of kids aren't even aware that vape products contain nicotine. And it works in the kind of the still developing young brain to make it even more addictive, and it makes them more prone to other addictions. And it also affects attention and learning and memory, which of course are very critical at any age, but particularly in the young. So what can we do to try to, help combat this? And there's a lot of tools out there. And one effective tool is to pass smoke-free policies in public areas like parks. And they do have an effect, a positive effect on helping people cut back on smoking. And so to have the festival part go tobacco-free, one of the main benefits would be that there'd be consistency for all the local parks in our area, because the other parks inside the city limits are run by the Northern Wasco County Parks and Recreation District, and they have already had a tobacco-free policy on those properties for years now. And to have a tobacco-free policy that would protect the public from secondhand smoke exposure. And the Surgeon General has determined that there is no safe level of exposure to secondhand smoke, because it has the same carcinogens that, of course, it has for the smoker. And it would also reduce litter and fire danger. Cigarette butts are the most littered item in the world. Vape products are also, cigarette butts are pretty resistant to degradation. They stick around for a long time in the environment. And vape products, especially disposable ones, those are even more resistant to degradation, and they've got plastics and hardware in them and electronics in them. And kind of a key thing to this also is having a smoke-free property just sends a message to our local youth that this is not something you want to do. It's about, trying to keep our community healthy and keep the public healthy. And we call it like denormalizing smoking. And there is an effect to it that having signs out there, it does send a message, and it can be an effective tool. And it also helps people that are either contemplating quitting or have quit, to be around someone who's smoking can be a very powerful trigger, and they just kind of lapse right back into smoking just by seeing it or smelling it. And kind of ironically, ex-smokers themselves are a group of people that they need protection from secondhand smoke, because just smelling it can for some of them cause spasming, and it's like hard on their lungs because their lungs have been compromised by their years of tobacco use. So we have come before the city council several times before with a similar request. We came in 2014 and in 2017. And both of those times we requested a policy and not an ordinance. And both times either council members themselves or staff kind of questioned the efficacy of that and said, this doesn't seem to have enough teeth in it. It doesn't seem like it could really be effective, and there's no enforcement aspect to it. So that's why we are before you tonight asking for an ordinance, because that would have, enforcement aspects to it. And I did reach out to other cities that have ordinances, not just policies, but an ordinance. And I talked to their police departments to see, what it was like for them to, have to enforce these ordinances. And so I spoke to LeGrand and Pendleton and Lebanon and Roseburg. And they, kind of described it as it's, not a heavy lift. It's actually a great tool. It helps them to, keep their local parks tobacco free. And they also said that compliance is quite high just with warnings. So they're not necessarily out there writing tickets and that kind of thing. So a warning is pretty effective. As far as what enforcement would really look like, when you have signage out at a park or a location, that tells people they can't smoke. There is a high level of self-compliance. And if people don't comply though, what that signage does is it just kind of empowers other people to speak up and say, hey, that's not allowed here. And it gives them the ability to kind of reach out and say, please put out your cigarette. And then kind of the third, aspect to it behind that would be a police response. And that would be, on a complaint basis, or if an officer happens to see it and they can initiate contact themselves. So there can be some exceptions if you have an ordinance like this. One exception that's fairly common is to allow ceremonial use by Native Americans. And what I'm talking about, it's called commercial tobacco use. And and then ceremonial use for a spiritual or ceremonial purpose would be permissible by Native Americans. And other cities kind of varied. The ones I talked to varied on whether they allow exceptions for smoking for concerts or private events. And some of the cities just say, no, there's no smoking anytime here ever, even if it's a private event. And then other cities do allow it in a certain contained area. As far as what the health district can offer, we can prepare a draft ordinance for the city's consideration. And we're also able in our budget to pay for the signage that would be installed and to pay for the installation of it. And we could also do a little bit of paid advertising for a public awareness campaign. And if a decision was made at this point in the year, that's actually great because we would have a little bit of time to get the public ready before the warm months, that there's going to be a rule change at the festival park. And we can certainly be a resource for questions that anybody has, either from the city or in the public about this. And then finally, we're excited that the health district is now allowed to directly provide tobacco cessation services to any member of the public who wants to try to quit. And we're also able to provide free nicotine replacement therapy like patches or gum or lozenges. And so that's a brand new thing that we're able to offer, and we're excited to help with that. And that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Any questions for Neita? I believe our staff may want some direction on this.
Yes, as Neita made mention, the North Central Public Health District has come and presented to the council on this topic a number of times. And so if there was interest or general consensus from the council in support of developing a tool such as Neita has mentioned, I can work with my staff to develop the appropriate ordinance or policy or whatnot for possible consideration by the council or just administrative action myself, but wanted to see if there was that support from council before doing that work.
How does the council feel? I see Councilor Long has her hand up. Councilor Long. She's on Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am in support of creating an ordinance in favor of no smoking in our one park that is for the city, so it matches with the rest of the parks throughout the Dalles.
Anybody else?
I have a quick question on the signage that you said that your agency would be willing to do the costs. So there's no cost to the city for making that change. It also brings consistency to the other parks in our city. So one park does allow smoking, the other one's none. So I think it brings alignment. And I think it's just healthy that, in my opinion, that we move down this path and look at an ordinance. So I support that.
Yeah, we're stressing here that we're not passing an ordinance tonight. We're merely directing the staff to draft an ordinance to bring it before us.
Voicing an opinion.
Yeah. Anybody else either have questions for Ms. Cecil or have a Councilor Richardson?
Yeah, I have a question for all concerned, but I guess mostly for Ms. Cecil. Contrary to what previous councils have said, how far, what percentage of success would we have, do you suppose, if we just put up a sign that said, please don't smoke here?
I couldn't answer that.
Wouldn't that get us most of what you're asking for without the
Well, I
work of
think,
an ordinance?
I mean, the sign is pretty important and there can be a lot of self-compliance with that. But there is value to having the ability to say you cannot do that. And a sign that says, please don't smoke, can be effective. But, you know, having that ability to say there's, you know, consequences for it, it does have a value to it. And it seems, I mean, this seems so far-fetched, but I know like and it's such a huge example, but in New York City, they did pass they passed an ordinance like this and they found like there was a 2/3 reduction in smoking. And it doesn't take what the police I talked to said, it doesn't take very many contacts to really get, I don't know, kind of get the word out somehow. But it does also require, you know, a consistent approach to it. But the signage is important in and of itself because it's the one thing that will be there all the time to notify people that they can't smoke or vape.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Cleaves.
And Councilor Richardson, if I'm picking up on some of that aspect of your question, and it was made mention a couple times that staff would potentially bring back an ordinance should this be supported. I think what I'd be looking for is staff would come back with a recommendation, and that may be an ordinance, but it may be a policy, it may be a facility action of that nature. So we would do that work if the concept was supported.
Thanks for that clarification.
Council Runyon.
It's good to go down the path and come back with whether it's a policy or an ordinance, whatever. But I am concerned that we make sure we do take a thorough look at the other communities that have enacted it as far as exceptions go and how those things are worded.
Any other questions or comments?
None.
Okay, I believe the staff has some.
Oops.
That's her hand up. Are you doing that?
Oh, Mr. Carter, did you have a question about this particular issue?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there was some guidance on what the penalty would be.
I think that's pretty much up to us and that really hasn't been discussed, but perhaps you know of other communities.
So the other towns, they had pretty sizable ones like 500 to 1,000 to 1,500. I think New York City's, I know it's kind of a silly example, is $50.
$50?
Yeah.
Okay, does that answer your question?
Yeah, for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, it's mostly warning. One of the cities I talked to, they wrote like 10 tickets in an entire year. So it's very low enforcement wise, but the warning is effective.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, we'll look forward to getting something back and you'll certainly be notified when it comes before the council in the future.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 6 is audience participation. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject which does not later appear on the agenda. Up to 5 minutes per person will be allowed. Citizens are encouraged to ask questions with the understanding that the city can either answer the question tonight or refer the question to the appropriate staff member who will get back to you within a reasonable amount of time. If a response by the city is requested, the speaker will be referred to the city manager for further action. The issue may appear on a future meeting agenda for city council consideration. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to on any subject that is not on the coming up on the agenda for up to 5 minutes? Yes, ma'am. Please step forward and state your name and address.
Karen Greb, and I'm representing my landlady who has been more or less harassed by the ordinance code violation thing. And so my landlady is Ruth Postema, and we're regarding the property at 817 Floral Court here in the Dalles. They have worked with, I believe it's Nikki Lessig, and the communications regarding products that were in the front yard had dropped off and she hadn't been continuing communicate. And then all of a sudden, they came onto the property, and pretty much abated it. Took a lot of the products that were not usable and were definitely not garbage. And they hauled away her daughter's truck, which was being filled with metals to turn in for recycle. And they took the truck and they took all kinds of things that weren't a little compressor that was working. It was just out there in the yard, but they didn't communicate that they were coming to do that. And Ruth happened to be helping in Portland with one of her cousins that was dying. And when she got back, all these things, 5-gallon gas cans that were obviously not ruined. There was a whole lot of stuff that she instituted them to come and get. It was obvious that they were working as a family, was working to do a cleanup. And all of a sudden, they show up without communicating that they were coming. And the daughter has been working with Nikki directly, I believe, and all of a sudden, communication totally dropped. So we need to know who to talk to about challenging the abatement. And what is the process of challenging that?
I'm going to refer this to our city attorney, okay?
Okay, thank you. The city has now sent a bill to the landowner for an exorbitant amount of money. She's a senior lady, almost 80 years old, and it almost appeared from tenant aspect that Nikki just had something in against Ruth. And
Ma'am, rather than get critical of our staff, I would hope that I believe the question you're going to ask our city attorney is some sort of appeal process. And that's what he could answer for you. Okay. Is that all right?
okay. Still, my question is, who do we talk to?
Sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Pardon?
I didn't catch your name.
I'm Karen Greb. I'm one of Ruth's tenants.
I see.
I live in the same house that they were thinking about.
Karen. Oh, Karen.
Karen,
Okay. How do you spell your last name?
Greb.
Okay. Are you related to the Postumas?
To the Postmates?
Yes.
No. I rent a room
Okay.
and from Ruth.
The reason I ask is because I received a voicemail about an hour and a half ago. Somebody claiming to be one of the Postuma's sisters. And I didn't know if that was you. Because
No,
it seems like you have a similar last name as the person who left me the
Yeah, her
voicemail.
name is very similar. And that's Edith, Ruth's sister.
Yeah.
And she lives up in Washington.
Okay.
But she's very concerned, I think, about Ruth's health, which has been affected by all of the harassment or what appears to be.
So it's my understanding this came to the council some weeks ago, and I believe I emailed Rebecca,
Okay.
who I understand to be Ruth's daughter.
Becca was working with Nikki and then Nikki quit communicating.
I think, and I'm not going to speak for the codes enforcement officer. She can certainly speak for herself, but I think that communications were interrupted after Rebecca called 911 the day of the cleanup and stated that she had a firearm in the house and was going to be protecting her property. And then 6 police officers swarmed the house, detained her, and they commenced the abatement. So I don't suspect there was much communication after that. Nikki was rather, scared for her life.
I wasn't there that day. I don't know.
Yeah. So this came to council, and I indicated that to Rebecca, that she was more than welcome to attend that meeting. She didn't come to that meeting. I was here for it. So was Nikki, for what it's worth. She doesn't scare that easily. And this matter has already been processed, and the city's already paid those contractors. It took 6 hours, 6 contractors. And so that's why the bill's what it was. At the time that this came to council, the matter was strictly to determine what the cost of the abatement should be. Very often, community members will come and they will show up and they'll make a case, and council might consider some exigent circumstances, or might, take a more holistic look at it and then say, you know what, we can see why that happened. That's a good excuse, or, X, Y, Z. And we'll go ahead and chop, $100 off of your total assessment, and the city will eat that cost, or half price, or whatever it is.
So they're billing her like $3,000.
Well, it took 6 people 6 hours to do the work. So that's why it costs that much. But if your question is what to do now, it's my understanding that this is a lien that's been assessed against the real property. The owners of the property should hire an attorney, and that attorney should give me a phone call. And that's about it. You're very welcome.
Okay, thank you.
I'm reading this for Ruth. Ruth Postema. I am in person. We heard about the abatement matter regarding 817 Court Street, Borough Court, because other methods of communication seem to be ineffective. All communication ceased between the city and our family. In the lack of communication, the property was abated, and we are requesting that the lines of communication be reopened and get discovery on what led up to them just showing up on the property. We were under the impression that satisfactory progress was being made because most of the property that they wanted off had already been cleaned up prior to the abatement. What was left was the truck, metal that they had been storing to take for recycle. However, the winter prevented a trip to Portland due to dangerous travel conditions. Who is the person to talk to about challenging the abatement? What is the process for her to challenge it?
Yeah, I think the city attorney has answered that. Would you leave us a copy of that letter? Would you like to do that? Why don't you give that to the city clerk? And I would take the advice of what the city attorney had pointed out, and we'll take it from there. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Her daughter's number and whatnot.
Yeah.
I leave that also.
You can leave that with the city clerk as well. Good. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have a hand back.
I know. Sir, does this have anything to do with this particular? Is there anything that you're going to say that has already not been said? Or, okay, we'll give you a few minutes. Okay. Well, come up here, sir, and give us your name and address.
My name is Eugene Simar. I attend a church here in the community, and that's how I was actually introduced to Ruth Postema.
Can you spell your last name and give us your address, please?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Simar, Simar, at 2035 Ridge Road.
Thank you.
I was a licensed contractor for a lot of years, and it was brought to my attention that there was a statement made about noxious weeds. And I actually personally, me and my 2 brothers went to her home, and for almost probably 2 to 4 weeks off and on different days was cleaning that place up. And I know there was not a noxious weed present on that premises at all. I was a professional landlord. I also know that those gas cans were all in good condition, and I believe a couple of them had fuel still in them. And the metal, I was a professional salvage person for a lot of years. My dad and I ran our own business. And it is not constitutional for a organization to haul off something that has a monetary value that is in process of being processed to go for sales so they can provide for their family and their needs. She does not have a job. She does not have, I know Rebecca also very well. She's been through some hard stuff lately, and I'm sorry, it is not constitutional for what they did. And I've been studying the constitutional law for 2 months now and looking into that. And when it has a monetary value that somebody can take in and recycle, as long as it's not hurting or harming or putting someone or the environment at risk, when it's on her property within her zoning, that's not legal to remove.
Okay. Well, we have a copy of her correspondence,
So-
and we'll just take it from there. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody else that would like to address the city council for up to 5 minutes? Oh, Mr. Barton, come forward.
Thanks. I'm Al Barton. I'm here in my professional capacity as the Executive Director at Center for Living Community Mental Health Program. And I heard your instruction, Mayor, both to be brief, so I'll honor that, and also to not speak about an issue forward in the agenda, but I am here to support the project at Project Turnkey. Just wanted to talk about the importance. The clients that we serve are typically folks with serious mental illness, right? Many of them are profoundly disabled because of their conditions. As we know, housing for those folks tends to be particularly challenging, and the opportunity to collaborate with Project Turnkey and the other projects that Kenny LaPointe has talked about is instrumental for the recovery of a lot of our clients. And a lot of our clients, a lot of folks think that recovery from serious mental illness is about a medicine, but oftentimes it's much more simple. It's the same things that we all need: basic needs, supports, and housing. And I think the opportunity to do that in a controlled environment that has rules and opportunities, the comments that some of the councilors mentioned are not lost, but I think it's a real historic opportunity. I've been doing this for 16 years at Center for Living here in Wasco and Hood River and Sherman counties. And I think this opportunity is an amazing alignment of the stars, and I'm honored that we be included. And I want to just assure the councilors and the mayor that we will make every effort to outreach and serve and support those members. Obviously, we can't contain every contingency, but I just want to speak in support of that project.
Thank you, Al. Appreciate it very much. Lindsay, we'll get to you after this one. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name is Derek Greenwood, and I am here representing One Community Health in my professional capacity. Our CEO and senior leadership wanted to be here themselves tonight. However, they have a competing board meeting, so they asked me to speak. So I serve as a nurse on the primary care team, also help run our medication-assisted therapy program and our peer support program. And our CEO, Max Janisic, wanted me to let you know that One Community Health is wholeheartedly committed to working with Kenny LaPointe and Project Turnkey. And we've already been in discussions to detail some of our staff to that site and help them stand up this operation. Speaking for all of our primary care providers and our senior leadership, we recognize that our clients are most vulnerable seniors and medically fragile community members. If they don't have a warm, safe place to recover from the medical issues that they're facing, and those issues get worse and they come back to our clinic, and we just see them deteriorate, and all of our hard work gets set back when we don't have somewhere that people can live. In recognition of that, we really we are partnering with Project Turnkey to extend our services to the site that they're offering there, much as we do at the pallet shelters right now. Seeing as the pallet shelters at any one time, up to 1/3 of their clients are also our clients, we feel that working in concert with them and Al Barton and Mid-Columbia Center for Living, that we can really improve the health of this community overall.
Thank you. Mhm. Lindsay, please say your name and make sure you spell your last name.
Have it saying it. Lindsay Jamay, Giame. 22nd Street. I want to first state that I wholeheartedly hope that all of these partnerships that I'm hearing everyone speak about this evening come to be. I just want to voice from a downtown business owner perspective, what our reality is on a day-to-day basis and some of the things that we have run into in the past 2 years. My husband and I own the workshop downtown the Dalles. And I can give a number of examples of different run-ins that we've had. And some have been, I would have to say with the Mid-Columbia Center for Living, where we had a hotline that we could call if we ran into any situation. We would call that hotline on a number of basis and wouldn't get any support. So we had staff members that were in very uncomfortable situations downtown. And I have some young individuals working for us. I have a lot of females working for us. So they're really challenging as a owner and a manager to try to make sure that my staff feels safe. This is separate from this as well, but some of the changes happening downtown. We're supposed to park on First Street for the location of our business. Most of my staff members call somebody when they're walking to their car because they want to make sure they get there safe, or they have mace now that they're carrying in their pockets. And I think this is just something I want to bring up because I hope that if these programs are in place and everyone is getting the appropriate help, that things change. I've also had to deal with homeless sleeping in our entryway, and that has been a challenge. Thankfully, the Dalles Police have been very responsive when we have issues that come up. But I know a lot of downtown business owners are concerned with some of the new changes and things that are happening. And I really hope that you guys are reaching out to us downtown business owners to make sure we stay. Because some of this could change kind of the trajectory of what is happening downtown. I think there's a lot of good happening. So I just wanted to voice my opinion on that.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hamada.
Thank you, Janet Hamada, Hamada. I'm here representing the next door at 11th and Kelly. I'm the executive director there, and I'm here in full support of this new project proposed by Mid-Columbia Community Action Council under Project Turnkey. As you know, or you might know, the next door has 35 programs. We've been working for 52 years since 1984 in the Dalles. And our office building right on Kelly is now home to an alternative school. We have a drop-in center for youth. We have counseling services there for youth and children and families and new moms. We have a clothing closet there. I can go on, but basically, I can't think of another project that we could wholeheartedly support given the lack of housing, secure housing that there is for so many of our clients. And so I'm here really to speak for the children and families. I was thrilled to hear about a transitional housing opportunity, and even more thrilled to hear that it's going to prioritize families because the children are suffering. And we see it every day. I talked to a counselor before I got here, one of our therapists. I talked to one of our home visitors before I got here. And I talked to our youth drop-in center coordinator. And they all told me about the fact that 90% of their clients are housing insecure. And that means primarily that they're either living out of their cars, couch surfing, living with friends, and they're just one step away from really being homeless. So this kind of facility is going to be very welcome for my team members to be able to provide services there and work in partnership with MCAC to help stabilize their situations. So I really appreciate the work of this organization, and I certainly hope for the city's support. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. In the back on the right. Oh, okay. That's fine. Yeah.
Hi, Erin Law, Mid-Columbia Housing Authority. We administer permanent federal rental assistance programs in Hood River, Wasco, Sherman, Klickitat, and Skamania County. And I'm here to voice our strong support of the Project Turnkey transitional housing project. Transitional housing provides a temporary solution to homelessness by providing stability and connection to connection to supportive services. And this stability makes it much more likely that people are going to find permanent housing in our community using our vouchers. And he mentioned in his presentation that many residents of the pallet shelters have found permanent housing, and that was with our vouchers. We've seen many more of our vouchers being able to be used because people have this stability and they have support to find housing. We look forward to continuing our partnership with MCAC in helping people get in permanent housing in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ballinger.
I'm Colleen Ballinger. I live at 1015 Lincoln. And I'm here to share concerns that I understand businesses would have. But I want to say, as a volunteer with St. Vincent de Paul and with the warming shelter with MCAC, and as a volunteer with Community Meals, I have been very frightened with some of the clients I've taken care of. But I will say, with this turnkey project, these are the people we want in our backyard. These are the people who are receiving services, who have made choices to receive help, to make changes in their life. Where some of the people that we see on Pentland Street are people who cannot and have not. So there's a big distinction in my experience with the two groups, and I have a lot of hope for the turnkey project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Last call. Ms. Agee, go ahead. Come.
Just have a comment.
You have a comment about?
No,
this?
I'll wait.
Bev Agee, 218 West 4th Street. Wasn't planning on talking, but when the workshop gal came up, I thought, well, I live there. I'm just a stone's throw away. And in our neighborhood, it's a lot of young families. And we live, I've like 26 years I've lived there, and I've seen all the changes. And I did talk to Kenny today, and it was reassuring, but we didn't know about this until a couple of Kenny's staff came by, gave us some information. And I thought, what happened? Usually you get some kind of notice, you know, a conditional use permit or something, but apparently the laws have changed, and I understand all that. But I do have some concerns. I have hope, and I'm praying for a successful thing. But I mean, we have people that use our front yard as a toilet. And my husband's on the board at St. Peter's, and we worry, our docents are elderly, usually. One gal's legally blind, and they have little emergency buzzer to get the police in a hurry to help them. And we've had our damage to the front door of the St. Peter's landmark. We see things all the time. There was a time not long ago when the Pentland Street crowd, the truck moved over with some, I don't know what was going on. It looked a little suspicious. They all moved in front of St. Peter's for about a week and a half. They kind of got them to move on. But from our porch, we look across the way, and it's that crowd. So we were concerned. I mean, they're throwing up. They're doing all the things that happen when you're in that terrible situation. And we were just concerned when we read the bit of material that they dropped by, any staff from this program, and it's all happened so quick. It's just been like 3 or 4 days to get this all, like, holy cow, we're retired. We have like senior citizen neighbors and a lot of young families with young children right there. And this is I thought, is this going to bring more into our community? So I had legitimate fears. And then people say, well, what kind of Christian are you? You're not, you don't want them in your neighborhood. It's really in our yard. And I had a concern that it was going to increase the volume, because it's like we service 3 counties. I'm like, holy cow. But then I did have a conversation, short conversation with the mayor. Thank you for ringing. And then and Kenny rang, and I am more reassured, but I just wanted to say that it's not just, I mean, it's disappointing. It's in the historic downtown of our cute little town. And this is what the first thing you see. So it sounds like not going to be as bad as my first fear. And he runs a really good operation. I've heard nothing but good things. So I've got mixed feelings, but I have hope that it's going to be fine. But I thought, the businesses, it's not I hope it doesn't bring more people in. I've been assured that it won't, like some other areas is like for the 100 beds or whatever. Anyway, I don't know if I'm making any sense. Mr. Reagan's already gone home. So, but I didn't know I was going to talk, but I just wanted to say something for people that live there. It's not just businesses. It's a community. All of 4th Street are families and elderly people that live on their own and young kids. And it's a worry, they're a bit dangerous. I mean, sometimes they're quite violent and my husband's been threatened, and we kind of check the street before you go out. You just kind of pace yourself. You don't want to walk along. Concerned of the volume of people it may attract. I have to say, I do feel better. I can see it's going to be done. Just disappointed that it's right there, right in our Trevitt Edition historic area. But like you say, he's going to fix it up. And talking too long. I just
No, you're okay.
wanted to
I'm sure Mr.
to say
LaPointe,
my 2 bits for the retired people that wanted to sit on their porch in peace without someone tinkling in their front yard.
thank you, Bev. Good. I'm sure Kenny will continue to be as responsive as he was today. Anybody else? Okay. We'll adjourn, not adjourn, we'll, oh, I'm sorry, Councilor McLaughlin.
I just have a quick shout out. I have observed firsthand the medical unit from One Community Health serving our community and the positive impact that you're making on our community. I just wanted to say thank you for doing that.
Okay. Moving along to number 7, which is the city manager's report. Mr. Klebs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple items. Wanted to give you an update on some of the staffing positions that we have here. We are still in the hunt, if you will, for a facility supervisor along with an economic development officer. We've had some transition with staff at our wastewater treatment plant, and we are seeing some promising forward movement with our new IT manager as well. So we've had some success, but there's been some difficulties with recruitment. I think was expressed a little bit earlier today. I also wanted to report that I've continued to have an appearance on the KODL radio station, Coffee Break Talk Show at Cousins, and also working with my executive assistant to get a slot on Radio Tieta and have an appearance on that station as well. The community outreach team is planning another trip to DC this spring. I will not be attending this trip, but we're coordinating with them on the different projects and policies that they continue to advocate for us. And finally, later this week, there is a One Gorge kind of coordinated effort to attend the Gorge-S Night Out down in Salem. And so Dan Spots and I will be traveling down, I think, with a few other community members to build and develop some of our relationships with our legislators down in Salem. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Klebs? Okay, we're going to go to city council reports. We'll start on my right with Councilor McLaughlin.
No report tonight.
Councilor Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just real quick, on January 25th, had a meeting of the Historic Landmarks Commission, and then the 26th with Q Life, and then February 6th met with the city manager and the mayor for a briefing, and that's all I have to report.
Thank you. Councilor Richardson.
Thank you. Briefly attended a briefing session, a climate task force session, a couple of conversations with constituents, and I have my first traffic safety committee meeting on Wednesday morning.
Councilor Runyon.
I too attended the Q Life meeting on January 26th with Councilor Randall, and I was going to let him give all the detail of it. he takes better notes. But there are a number of issues going on within the city and without the city around the county concerning Q Life, and maybe we'll bring a report the next time. Also attended the Columbia Gorge Veterans Museum meeting. It's closed currently for the winter season. It will be opening before too long, next month or two. And then today, this afternoon, the Mid-Columbia Veterans Memorial Committee at the Civic Auditorium. And Mike Knopf of Point Man Ministries was our speaker.
Counselor Long.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the January Urban Renewal Agency meeting was canceled, but we have a meeting coming up next Tuesday. I attended a briefing session with the city manager, mayor, and another counselor on February 9th. And I have been talking with concerned business owners and residents about the issue that was brought up tonight regarding the housing project turnkey. And I will be representing the city of the Dalles for the community outreach team visit to Washington, D.C. at the end of March. And that's my report.
Thank you. Item 9 is the consent agenda. Items of a routine and non-controversial nature are placed on the consent agenda to allow the city council to spend its time on more important items and issues. Any councilor may request that an item be pulled from the consent agenda and be considered separately. Items pulled from the consent agenda will be placed on the agenda at the end of the action items section. Tonight, we have 3 items on the consent agenda. First is the approval of the January 23rd regular city council meeting minutes. Second is the approval of the January 17th special city council meeting minutes. And third is the approval of Eddie Case, my appointment to the City Plan Commission. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
All right, I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Counselor.
I'll second that.
Been moved by Counselor McLaughlin and seconded by Counselor Randall to approve the consent agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hand. Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 10A is a resolution adopting a supplemental budget. We're going to be double teamed tonight. We have Dave Anderson, our Public Works Director, and Angie Wilson, our Finance Director, to come before the council to present this issue. Yes.
You got to read your little diatribe.
Do that. Now is the time for a public hearing regarding the approval of a supplemental budget. This is a legislative hearing to receive testimony regarding the proposed supplemental budget. I will open the public hearing and ask for a staff report. Following the staff report, I will ask for testimony from the audience. At the conclusion of the testimony, the public hearing will be closed and the matter turned over to the city council for deliberation and a decision. So I'm now opening the public hearing and I'm asking for a staff report.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council. You have before you my agenda staff report for resolution number 23-007. This is adopting a supplemental budget for the fiscal year of 22-23, making appropriations and authorizing expenditures from and within the various funds of the City of the Dalles adopted budget. The supplemental budget adds funds to existing budgets, while budget amendments move already budgeted funds between categories of the same fund without adding to the fund's total budget. A public hearing is required for any supplemental budget that changes a fund by more than 10%. The proposed supplemental budget is more than 10% of the operating budget of either of the affected funds, so a public hearing is required this evening. Resolution number 23-007 is a supplemental budget of various funds of the Public Works departments. These additional revenue sources have come from the audited financial statements, bringing in additional funds into the beginning fund balance. The first one is the City Street Fund has realized an additional $895,232, with $150,000 to be allocated to the ADA upgrades, $350,000 to be allocated to the contracted chip seal, and $395,232 for maintenance projects. The Public Works Reserve Fund has realized an additional $97,901 with a proposed allocation for a 5-yard or a 10-yard dump truck purchase. The City Water Capital Reserve Fund has reserved an additional $1,695,908, proposed to be allocations of $200,000 for the Wicks plant roof, $220,000 for the East 9th Street water main, $350,000 for the SCADA Phase 1, and $925,908 for replace fund for Garrison Reservoir painting. The city's wastewater fund has realized an additional $315,900 for the proposed allocations of $200,000 for the wastewater treatment plant repairs and $115,900 for the East 9th Street storm construction. The wastewater fund has realized an additional $234,268 for proposed allocations of $30,000 for the wastewater treatment plant maintenance parts and $75,000 for the air piping replacement, $129,268 for the West 9th Street sewer line. And lastly, the sewer special reserve fund has an additional $1.467186 for proposed allocations of $430,000 to the 2022 slip line contract, $350,000 for SCADA, and $200,000 for the Trevitt Street storm sanitary, $219,233 for the 2nd Street sewer, and $267,953 for the 2nd Street storm. So that was a lot to present to you. So I've asked the Public Works Director to be present this evening because these are additional projects that he's putting into his funds this evening. And if you have any questions, he'd be more than happy to answer them for you.
Okay, is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak either in favor or in opposition to this ordinance? Anybody? Excuse me, a resolution. Okay. With that, no testimony. I'm closing the public hearing. I'll turn it over to the City Council for questions and comments. Council Runyon.
There are 4 words in each one of the little paragraphs, realized and additional for each one of these items. We open a drawer and there was a magic pile of money. Where'd it come from?
It's the money's coming from projects that we either began last year and didn't finish within that last fiscal year. And so some of the funds carried over, or we didn't get them started last year. So these are funds that were budgeted to be allocated in the previous fiscal year, didn't all get spent. We're moving them and the project work over into.
That would have been a great sentence at the start of this whole thing. Thank you.
Her idea, though.
Well, check it. Things can be found.
All of these are projects that are on a variety of lists somewhere. You've had in mind and or started or were planning to start. They weren't just sort of spending a lot of money on these are all fun projects things.
that were presented in either last year's budget or already included in this year's budget. You know, we estimate how much we were going to spend in each year, and we spent less last year and need to carry over more. I will point out in Fund 53, the Water Reserve Fund, Council may recall that we had advertised that project, and the bids came in more than we could afford. And I had indicated to the council at that time we did not have that project rebudgeted for the current year. The supplemental, and council had indicated a desire for us to look for opportunities to fund that Wicks roof project. This supplemental the budget does.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I'm looking for a motion to approve the resolution.
I'll go ahead, I guess. I'll move to adopt resolution number 23-007, adopting a supplemental budget for fiscal year 2022-23, making appropriations and authorizing expenditures within various funds of the Dalles adopted budget.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Counselor McLaughlin and seconded by Counselor Richardson to approve the resolution. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks very much, you guys. Okay. Item 10B is the regarding the closeout of the Community Development Block Grant. This also is a public hearing. With us tonight is Josh Chandler, our Director of Community Development, and Karen Long, who introduced herself previously. So now is the time for a public hearing to receive testimony regarding closeout of Community Development Block Grant, project number HA 2101, providing COVID-19 emergency rental and mortgage assistance. As before, I will open the public hearing and ask for a staff report. Following the staff report, I will ask for comments from the public. And after that, I'll close the public hearing and turn it over to the City Council. So I'm opening the public hearing. Mr. Chandler.
Good evening, Mayor Mays, Councilors, Joshua Chandler, Community Development Department. I'm joined this evening with two representatives from the Housing Corporation to provide any additional context following my presentation, as well as any Spanish translations that may be needed by any members of our audience that would be providing comment this evening. As mentioned, the purpose of this public hearing is to receive public testimony regarding the administrative of the CDBG grant project HA 2101, which provided rental and a mortgage assistance, as well as utility assistance for qualified households. In response to the coronavirus 19 pandemic, Congress passed the CARES Act in March 2020 to provide economic aid to citizens negatively impacted by the pandemic. A portion of these funds were allocated to the Oregon State CDBG program administered by Business Oregon for the creation of the COVID-19 Emergency Housing Assistance Grant Program. This program was created to provide emergency housing to low and moderate income households earning below 80% of average median income. The city, along with the Housing Corporation, was awarded a $400,000 grant in August of 2021. Unlike many CDBG grants, this one was specific to just 1 year. It was only eligible for 1 calendar year. So this and all unused funds during this period would need to be forfeited. A couple statistics provided for you regarding this project during your staff report. Mentioned this project happened in 2022, so it was good for January 1st to December 31st. Counties assisted was the Hood River, Sherman, and Wasco counties. Communities, Cascade Locks, Hood River, Mosier, the Dalles, and Wasco. 158 households were assisted. 65% of those households, female head of household. 370 residents were assisted with this program. 90% of those were here in the Dalles. The total amount at the end of all this, pending a final draw, is $315,000, and then the additional $85,000 will be paid to the Housing Corporation for administration. The city and the Housing Corp are currently in the process of finalizing all program closeout material. Budget implications for this, there are none. The city is not authorized to receive funding for administration, so that $85,000 is entirely sent to the Housing Corporation, but the city is responsible for processing disbursement of funds between the state and the Housing Corp. So therefore, in your budget, you'll see that basically the revenue and expenditure line items are equal. And then before we take any public comment, I do want to just send out a thank you to the Housing Corporation, both Dave Peters and Karen Long, as well as the city, people that are involved on our team in the city, Finance Director Angie Wilson, City Manager Matthew Cleaves, as well as 2 former employees, former City Manager Julie Kruger and former Community Development Director Alice Cannon.
I'm happy to say that we provided that $315,000 to our community, and we will not be sending any money back to the state. So with that, more than happy to open up comments.
Well, before we do that, is there any comments from the audience? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak either in favor or in opposition to this? Anybody? Okay, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing and turn it over to the city council. Does city council have any questions or comments for Mr. Chandler or Ms. Long?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, before you, let's get a motion to approve the recommendation of the staff to close. out the grant.
There's no recommendation on
There
this. So yeah, this was strictly an opportunity for to bring in public comment as part of the grant project.
Thanks very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, item 11A. Staff recommendation for proposed contract for ADA improvement project. Mr. Anderson.
Honorable Mayor, members of council, the item before you is the award of the 2023 ADA or Americans with Disabilities Act Improvement Project, which is contract number 2023-003. This project this year will actually utilize funds for our ADA upgrades from 2 years. The rollover from last year was just authorized in the supplemental budget approved by the city council just a few minutes ago. The projects are being undertaken in compliance with the city's ADA transition plan, which we adopted in 2019. This year, the project will include the construction of 40 ADA ramps, most of which are along Union Street between 4th and 7th Streets. And then at 5 other locations in town that are identified in your staff report. One of those other 5 locations, which is at 9th and Cherry Heights Road, is a project that's being undertaken in direct response to a citizen complaint that was received by the city's Traffic Safety Commission. And our ADA transition plan requires the city to consider the merits and attempt to address complaints related to ADA compliance as they're addressed or as they're received, excuse me. The project was designed in-house and was advertised for bid. We received 5 bids, with the low bid coming from Van Neville Concrete and Curb in the amount of $309,859.04 within budget line code 005-500-000-7510 of the street fund. We have $300,000 allocated, and we can make up the other $9,000 with funds from the also within that same line code. So we have available funds for the project. With that, it's staff's recommendation that the city council authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Van Neville Concrete and Curb for the 2023 ADA improvement project, contract number 2023-003, in an amount not to exceed $309,859.04.
Any questions for Mr. Anderson?
I've got to ask, can you remind me within plus or minus some amount, how many curbs we have to remediate or update?
I remember the 60-year plan is what's stuck in my head. I want to say it's on the neighborhood of 800.
Yeah.
That there are already sidewalks in place that need to be upgraded. And there's probably and I think there was about an equal number of intersections that someday will need to be addressed that don't currently have sidewalks. So they're a second level of priority.
Thanks.
I know we get a lot of people interested in improving their sidewalks as part of their 50/50 program. Or any of those include?
So we have been, if a 50/50 sidewalk application comes in and is accepted, we have not been charging
those homeowners 50% of the cost of an ADA ramp. We didn't feel it was equitable to be doing some of them in town and penalize someone just because they came in on the ADA. So if there's a project that requires a ramp upgrade, the city's paying the full cost of the ramp
They
upgrade.
do happen.
And they do happen.
Thank you. Anybody else? Looking for a motion?
Well, sorry, I was going to say, since I asked the question, I'll make the motion. I move that we authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Von Neville Concrete and Curb for the 2023 ADA Improvement Project, contract number 2023-003, in an amount not to exceed $309,859.04.
I will second that.
Moved by Counselor Richardson and seconded by Counselor McLaughlin to approve the contract, to authorize the contract. Any more questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Item 12. I'm sorry, 11B, First Street Project Contract. Mr. Chandler.
Thank you again, Mayor Mays. Councilors, Joshua Chandler, Community Development Department. I'm joined this evening via Zoom by Peter Craig, Project Manager for KPFF Consulting Engineers. Provide any additional context following my presentation. Peter has considerable amount of knowledge on this project, having overseen the project from the very beginning. As mentioned, this next item is for the consideration of a new contract for KPFF for civil engineering services for the First Street project. Everyone is, I'm sure, rather familiar with this project. I did want to give a brief history of the contract history between KPFF and the city. In 2008, the city and KPFF entered into a contract for the design of Downtown Riverfront Connection Project, now more commonly known as the First Street Project. Since then, there have been 16 amendments to the original contract, varying levels of scope changes, timeline changes. Rather than entering into a 17th amendment and recent changes in funding, as well as work with ODOT, staff proposes entering into a new contract, brand new contract, to better address the city's current needs. The most significant change to the previous agreements were the mutual termination of the city's partnership with ODOT, as well as the discontinuance of federal grant funding award for the project in 2007. This termination was approved by City Council at the October 24th City Council meeting, was acknowledged by ODOT on November 2nd, and resulted in a cost savings of approximately $940,000. This excludes project construction costs. In addition, ODOT's statewide program and funding services approved an exception of repayment request on November 17th, which removed the city's requirement to repay previously expended funds, $320,000 savings there. The First Street project currently sits at 95% completion. However, this revised scope adds and will incorporate previous incomplete tasks outlined in the original contract. Will include take on the responsibilities that ODOT was first outlined to take care of, as well as adding some additional tasks that staff felt needed to be added that were previously covered in the original scope. This new contract does assume 24-month schedule from the notice to proceed to project bid. This award, KPFF, is authorized by the city's local contract review board rules, which authorize new contracts for the direct appointment of engineering services supporting continuing projects. Estimated fees expected to exceed $250,000. This award promotes the efficient use of funds due to KPFF's history, 15-year history with this project. KPFF was the original, during the original contract, KPFF was awarded the contract, competitive contract as the most qualified proposer. Budget implications for this project. The estimated contract fees under this contract are not to exceed $495,162.16. City allocated a little over $4.3 million in Fund 18 for this. So therefore, the city has sufficient budget for this award. With staff's recommendation, I would be moving to award contract number 23-004 to KPFF. Authorize the city manager to execute the engineering services agreement in an amount not to exceed $495,162.16. That's a typo in my staff report as presented. And with that, I am more than happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Chandler?
One.
I'm
One.
sorry,
Yeah,
Councilor
sorry.
Richardson.
Josh, is 24 months a likely time frame to complete this work, or is that like a buffer amount of time?
The buffer is in the right of way coordination of First Street. So that's factoring in 18 months of coordination to work out the ownership of right of ways within our First Street and the railroad. We
Got
do
it.
know that working with the railroad can take a considerable amount of time. So therefore it could be reduced, but the safe bet is 24 months.
Thank you. It's not just engineering
Correct.
as such. All right. Thank you very much.
And when construction would start immediately thereafter?
Yeah, following the completion of all this work. So
Yeah.
we could possibly see springtime 2025, unfortunately.
We have any idea how long that will take? Construction?
I do not have those numbers. Peter probably provide some assistance on that.
Mr. Craig, could you comment on that?
Sure. I think the big item of work is reconstructing all the walls along First Street. I think it's possible that it could be a one-season construction project completed in 2025. The way the schedule lines out, the project could probably be bid in late 24. So the contractor would be able to start just as soon as the weather allows and material procurement allows. So we're going to do everything we can to try to line it up to be a one-season project, potentially 2 years if something were to not line up.
Great. Well, even if it's 2025, it would still be a 17-year
Yeah,
from start to finish.
it held the oldest.
Through no fault of yours.
Held the oldest project number in ODOT system, so they were happy to let it go.
No. Any other questions? Okay, with that, would anybody like to make a motion?
Mayor,
Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to make the motion as Chair of Urban Renewal, which we're in conjunction with the city on this. I'd like to move to award contract number 23-004 to KPFF Consulting Engineers and authorize the city manager to execute the engineering services agreement in an amount not to exceed $495,162.16 as presented.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councilor Long and seconded by Councilor Randall to approve the contract. Is there any more questions or comments? I thought you, I'm sorry. Did you want to
I'll
answer the
second it.
question? Oh,
I started to
Wait.
make a motion.
yeah, that's why I gave you the second. Okay. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Chandler.
Thank you.
Okay, item 12A, resolution updating the city's contract review board rules. Mr. Kara.
Thank you very much, Mayor Mays. All Oregon public bodies, and I wrote in the staff report cities, but all public bodies are required to establish, implement, and follow some standardized procurement rules which are pursuant to the state statutes known as the Oregon Public Contracting Code. Very fortunately, Oregon law authorizes the city to have its own procurement rules, which can include portions of some model rules that were issued by the Oregon Attorney General, or can be completely independent entirely. And so we already have a general ordinance codified as Chapter 1.24 of our code that establishes this council as the city's contract review board authority, and so authorizes it to adopt the rules necessary to carry out the provisions of the code by resolution. And so here before you tonight, you'll have a proposed resolution number 23-006 to update the city's contract review board rules. The last time these rules were updated was in 2011. And so we're running on 12 years of the same contracting rules under the same contracting dollar thresholds from 2011. And the world is unrecognizable in a lot of ways from 2011. And maybe especially so if you took a look at our 2011 rule book. I mentioned in my staff report as well that best practices would be updating these rules every 5 years or so. So many little changes at the state level occur every single legislative session that impact the world of public contracting. And so we can get by only for so long without taking a hard look at our rules. And more importantly, updating our rules is a tremendous benefit to this city. And so realizing that benefit, or at least the potential for that benefit, the city manager decided to organize an ad hoc team comprising himself, the city's finance director, the city's public works director, and me to strategize on developing something more functional and more modern that would meet the changes in the legal landscape while also giving the city the most flexibility and the most purchasing power with these public resources. And so attached to the resolution, which is included here in the staff report and in the packet, you'll find a copy of the proposed rules, which would be ultimately, if adopted here tonight, effective February 14th, 2023, tomorrow. And again, the primary objective of this group was to maximize our legal and fiscal flexibility, while of course maintaining the integrity of our public contracting. And so there are countless changes. We ended up condensing a currently 172-page rule book down to 37. And I'm very proud of that number. It's down to a fifth of the size that it was. There's too many changes to list. However, I did put some of the highlights that emphasize some of the changes that are being recommended as far as spending and award authorizations and the competitive requirements for the contract solicitations themselves. You may notice, taking a look at page 94 in the packet, the current spending authority for example, a department manager in the city is $15,000 without seeking any further approvals. The proposed changes would increase that $15,000 cap to $25,000. Again, these $15,000 authorizations were implemented in at least as far back as the 2011 rules, which we still follow today. The city manager's approval threshold would be increased from $50,000 to $100,000. And currently, anything over $50,000 comes to this council. However, under the proposed rules, anything over $100,000 would be coming to council. One of the biggest changes would be the changing in emergency authorizations, which are very infrequent, and we have very specific rules that govern the ways that emergency dollars are spent. Currently, the city manager is authorized to spend up to $100,000 without coming to council for an emergency authorization. Under the proposed rules, that would be increased up to $500,000. And in some cases, we define in the rules as being of extreme necessity. The city manager would have unlimited authorization. There are so many protections in place that make me very comfortable and very confident in making the recommendation to make this change as well. And so those are some of the authorization changes for spending. There's a whole host of those that changed for the competition requirements for our city's public contracting. These are well within the framework contemplated by the public contracting code. There are some cities that take much more flexible approaches, and some cities that take much more conservative approaches. I'd like to think that this is a very happy middle ground that balances all the different competing interests involved when it comes to competition and public contracting. And so again, there are too many changes to list. But some of the highlights, at least on these two areas, are indicated in the agenda packet. And of course, if any counselor has any specific question on any of these, I'm more than happy to talk about them. This project took us, I would say 3-4 months to really nail down. And so I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anybody might have on these. And if there are no questions, staff's recommendation is to adopt resolution number 23-006 as presented.
You'd still recommend it even if we had questions.
I would, that's exactly right. I would still recommend it.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Kara?
No.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute. If no one's going to ask, I'm going to ask. Walk me through why you don't have heartburn, especially as someone who's somebody as careful and thorough as you are, in us authorizing the city manager to no limit on spending in case of emergency.
Well,
and also no need to consult with city council. I mean, it's a small town.
It is a small
12
town.
minutes from end to end. You're telling you we cannot get in a car, email, phone, or otherwise get a hold of city council in the case of an emergency to do some sort of consultation?
Mr. Mayor, may I respond to Councilor Richardson?
Absolutely.
Terrific. So that's an excellent question, Councilor Richardson. Well, again, I've included so many protections for the city's interests in these rules that even a single dollar spent that isn't an authorized expenditure will be found, the city, it'll find its way back to the city, more or less. I mean, somebody will be liable for that expenditure that was made without authorization. And so with specific respect to the city manager, well, he is one of 3 appointed by this council, and the next city manager will be one of 3 appointed by the next city council, and so on and so forth. And so as a direct report, ultimately the conduct of the city manager is subject to the city council's review. And so that's one check on the powers that be here. Another is, you're right, it is a small city in the sense that it can be traversed in 12 minutes from end to end, maybe even a little bit faster. But we really thought a lot about this in our groups, in our group that was formed to draft these specific rules. And candidly, there was a lot of back and forth. And I tried to sort of foresee council thinking about this issue on one hand, realizing that staff would appreciate the flexibility, and on the other hand, realizing that what we're talking about is a blank check in a lot of ways. And so that's a very dangerous game, and I can totally appreciate that. But ultimately, when it comes to instances of extreme necessity, which are not fully contemplated by the Oregon Public Contracting Code, it makes a whole lot of sense to me not to impose a cap on the CEO of the city's ability to spend money in response to an emergency impacting the city to such a degree that it's deemed an extreme necessity, which is very different than, for example, a more customary emergency. And the most recent one that I can think about working on was with our public works director for the interior painting of the water tank for the cirrhosis reservoir, I think is what it's called. And in that sense, that was an emergency that required an emergency contract. But it wasn't an extreme necessity in the sense that if something doesn't happen tonight before this meeting's over, there's going to be serious catastrophic failure of the city's infrastructure or harm to the public safety or health. And so in cases of extreme necessity, yes, There is no time to drive across town. There is no time to convene a special or emergency meeting of the city council, especially in light of, what's commonly referred to, it's my understanding in this region, as a Cascadia tier event or a Cascadia tier natural disaster, where maybe communications are severed, or maybe there is a rupture down the middle of the city. And, we have to think about these types of hypotheticals and what the city's leadership can do in response to those. And if there is no authority for an individual like the city manager, or actually specifically the city manager, to make these sort of unilateral decisions absent any council direction, then the city's, that's a liability that faces this city. It's a real liability and a legal liability. But most importantly, the biggest balance here is council's ability to dismiss the city manager if they make a decision or spend a single penny that is not authorized. And so, again, there are so many protections that have been integrated into these rules that I'm very comfortable recommending that council adopts them as presented without changing them, really. But, if there are concerns, maybe there are some things that we haven't thought of, but I'd like to think that we've been extremely comprehensive here.
To follow up on that, as one who's been in this position before, what if we were to authorize, and put conditions on the authority to, for example, like one condition could be a good faith effort has been made to obtain the consent of the city council, or if communication is impossible. And I can see with for example, an earthquake, a devastating earthquake, communications would be cut off and there'd be no way for the city manager to get a hold of the council. But what if we put that kind of stipulation in here? These are very formalized, and I don't even know if in your opinion, that would be the place for something like that.
We have some provisions baked in, and I just opened it up. And if any counselor wants to follow along, it's on page 131. And these rules are written in such a way that I'd like to think that they're easy to read relatively. For what it's worth, I did write them, but I think still easy to read. And so we can go through it just very, very briefly, because I think it is a worthwhile endeavor for us to look at this, arguably the most dramatic change in the rules, but still arguably one of the most important. And it indicates that the city manager, whenever the city manager determines the city's immediate execution of a contract is necessary in response to an emergency, they may execute an emergency contract without competitive selection or award as provided here and consistent with state law. And so for competition, which is a different element here of this conversation, it's different than authorization, but for competition, the time must be permitting. There has to be an attempt, and I guess arguably that could be considered a good faith attempt, right? To find a competitive price and quality evaluation to ensure the city's getting a good deal ultimately. But with respect to the actual authority, we start talking about the emergency reporting, and as soon as possible, in light of the emergency circumstances, so whatever those happen to be, the city manager must notify the council and the city attorney in writing of the nature and facts of the circumstances surrounding this emergency, how the contractor was used, or I'm sorry, how the selection of the contractor occurred, and the reasons why the selection method was deemed in the best interest of the city. And there are some special particular rules for emergency construction contracts, and those are contemplated by state law. And so again, these are just some of the protections that are implemented for emergency protections. There is a reporting requirement to both the city council and the city attorney of the nature of the emergency and how the contractor was selected. And ultimately, when there's an explanation of the reasons for why this was deemed in the best interest of the city, there should be more than likely an explanation of why there was no time to do this a different way. And that gets reported to both the council and to the city attorney. I do think that this should cover the concerns associated with having this authority.
Well, like you say too, if the city manager is going to have to use his judgment, it's a judgment call on his part as to what he should do in circumstances such as this. And like with anything else, if the city council doesn't like the decision he made, I'm not going to say we're going to, we discharge or, it's something that would certainly come up during his performance evaluation.
Sure.
So. Anybody else? Councilor Runyon.
I thought this might be a typo, so I wanted to ask a question.
Yeah.
Under current, up to $1,000 by authorized city employees. Under proposed, up to 5,000 by all city employees.
Oh, yeah, that's correct.
Well, I just went to work last week and I need to go to the store. I mean, it just seems like, why not authorize city employees? I have no problem with the increase in the amount, but it just seems like we've just opened up a can of worms.
Yeah, I believe that that was a change requested by the city manager. And so I'll defer to him on that particular question. But again, it's sort of a similar answer, and I'll mention this, Rod. Any purchase that is not authorized, and whatever that means is a function of these rules, and we have, a definition for what that means in the rules, is a personal liability to the employee or whoever spends the money. And so this doesn't harm the city's interest when somebody spends the city's money on something they shouldn't, because ultimately they'll be personally liable for the difference. And so that applies in all cases, even down to $1. And so, but with that said, yeah, I do recall this being a staff decision. So I'll pass the microphone to the city manager.
Well, and what I can add at this point is some of the subsequent work that'll follow the adoption of these local contract review boards will be some administrative policy updates to the credit card system that we have, who is authorized to have a credit card and use that credit card, who may submit check requests, and that process that looks like receiving that ultimate approval. So, there's not city employees walking around with cash that they can just use on their own. There are some
Hope not.
additional policies and procedures in place when purchasing an item.
Follow up?
Yeah.
Another observation here, because, and I'm not against it in general, but I just think the thing I brought up was a key item, but some of these minimum to maximums have gone up quite a bit, right? Which we just discussed. I would like to see us just put into the format here that we review this in 1 year's time to see how things are working and if any adjustments need to be made.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm not. Yeah.
But 1 year from the effective date.
Sure, we can put that. I'm not so sure. It would make sense to put that specific idea into the rules, but maybe we can.
What if we made a motion to approve the rules and with the stipulation that we revisit this in February of 2024?
Sure.
City clerk have a comment?
Add that sentence to the resolution.
That's exactly how it would take shape. It would be added to the resolution, but not to the rules, right?
Does that satisfy your concern?
Yeah, whether it's in a staff memo or whatever, however we have to do it.
And so I would like to hone in on that, Councilor Runyon, for just a moment. Would you like these rules to be adopted subject to that 1 year provision, or would you like these rules to be adopted, and would you like the city manager to come back with a report in a year to give the council an update on how the rules have been implemented and what's working and what isn't?
I think it's the same thing, but as long as it's in there, that it's going to be reviewed in a year, whether it's in the resolution for the item or it's an aside written any way you like to do it.
Hey, Jonathan worded that last part. I think that would satisfy your concern, and
Yeah,
it would
that's fine.
Okay.
word that second part with
Okay. Well, then I suppose my recommendation has changed. And so I am now recommending staff recommendation number 1 as amended. As amended with that change, and I will work with the city clerk tomorrow at incorporating some of that additional language
into the resolution.
into the resolution.
So we're not going to pass this tonight.
I certainly hope that this is passed tonight. Resolution that is resolution number 23-006 as amended, based off of Councilor Runyon's
So we're
comment.
trusting you to amend the
Yes.
resolution according to wishes of us.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I think.
We'll just go with as amended, and then
think I can
we'll
tackle-
add the language directly.
Is that okay with everybody?
That would be staff's recommendation.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Chew on this bone a minute longer, actually.
Counselor Richardson,
Yes,
do you have a question?
I do. Sorry. Thank you. Jonathan.
Yeah.
I'm going back. I'm not quite done here. Is extreme necessity defined anywhere, or is it just sort of good common sense understanding? I mean, emergency is defined, right? What is extreme necessity?
We do have the definition of an emergency.
Yeah.
I believe that I did not define extreme necessity, but it is something more than what's considered to be an emergency.
It's extremely emergency.
We bounced so many phrases back and forth. You know, there was urgency versus emergency.
Sure.
And, you know, extreme necessity versus, I almost wanted to incorporate like the word disastrous or something, you know what I mean? To really evoke that sense of, you know, these are dire situations.
So let me strike that. That was easily answered. Just your thought on the addition of a clause in the extreme necessity section. What about saying something like if extreme necessity, comma, where council cannot be feasibly contacted, comma, city manager over $500,000. In other words, it puts a burden of trying to contact unless contact is just not practicable.
So I'm looking at page 131.
I was looking at page 94, but okay.
Oh, 94.
Multiple places.
The packet?
Packet page 94. Resolution page 2. Spending authorizations.
Yeah. So this is just the staff report. I thought you were talking about in the rules.
Might
So,
direct you to page 132.
yeah.
Okay.
So we have 131 is the start of the emergency procurement section, and we have
Thank you. Yes.
yeah 132, which is page 31 of the rules.
Thank you.
There's too many page numbers. And so, yes, we have something just like that generally. And I think I want to make sure I address your question correctly. So we also have number 4, which I didn't read earlier in response to Councilor Runyon's question. But for all emergency procurements, what these rules currently contemplate is that the city manager is specifically authorized to award those contracts without specific authorization by the city council whenever that price is less than $500,000. However, if the emergency procurement is a matter of extreme necessity, the city manager is specifically authorized to award contracts having any contract price without specific authorization by the city's council. And so are you suggesting that there be an insertion here along the lines of unless the city council is immediately reachable or reasonably reachable?
Exactly. My question to you is, what do you think about that? Right now, it's essentially you know, in the case of some dire emergency, no contact or authorization is required, or even attempted, or even notice being attempted in a serial fashion. I guess I'd like to think that that's going to happen at any rate, but we're not necessarily just writing for our current city manager, right? We might be writing for someday in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see any immediate drawbacks associated with including a provision similar to what's indicated in the page right before that, where it says where time permits, number 1 on page 131 of 145. Do you see where it says emergency competition? The first sentence begins with where time permits. I really like the way of describing the situation as being a situation where we can ask the question where time permits. And so with that said, I can wordsmith this any number of ways, but I would probably end up with a sentence that sounds like where time permits. Well, that would be sort of at the end of the sentence. I'd have to wordsmith.
How about this? If the emergency procurement is a matter of extreme necessity and time does not permit contact with the city council, comma, the city manager specifically authorized, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, I like that. And time does not permit.
Noting that you can get from one end to the other in 12 minutes or less.
How about time does not reasonably permit? Can I meet you halfway?
That's great.
Time
All
does
right.
not reasonably permit.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well,
You still want to do this tonight, or do you want to bring it back to us in 2 weeks with all these?
no,
changes?
I'd very much prefer doing it tonight, considering these are rather, clerical at this point, as far as the substance. I mean, I already understand the concerns of at least two members of this council. My recommendation is still to modify these, or to adopt this resolution 23006 as amended with Councilor Runyon's recommendation and Councilor Richardson's recommendation. That's been on the record, and we have a recording of it, and I'll go back and watch it and make sure that it's 100% accurate.
Okay, could you repeat the motion so that somebody can make it properly?
Absolutely. Moving to adopt resolution number 23-006, a resolution updating the City of the Dalles Local Contract Review Board rules effective February 14th, 2023 as amended.
Okay, is there such a motion?
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Counselor. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved by Counselor Richardson and seconded by Counselor Randall to approve the resolution as amended. Is there any more questions or comments?
I would just like to say good job on condensing that very important document down to a reasonable number of pages.
Thank you. It was such a group effort. It's a big thank you to the finance director and the public works director and the city manager for indulging me.
We're all here and sitting in the audience. Thank you for your efforts. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Finally, item 13. We have our police department here tonight. Come forward, please. Tell us all about your drone policy recommendation.
That's what we're here for. Mayor Mays, members of the council, for the record, my name is Tom Worthy. I'm the chief of police for the City of the Dalles Police Department. Tonight's meeting, we've certainly been a long ways around the block. A very wide ranging meeting, and I'm going to introduce a new subject, which is our police department drone policy. So like any good police officer faced with a complex assignment, I did the most reasonable thing, which was to call for backup. Seated to my right is Officer Canyon Reams, a Medal of Valor winner, the Dalles Police Department. Also in the back is Captain Jamie Carrico, a Purple Heart winning officer for the Dalles Police Department. Also in the audience is Mr. Mike Davis, who's a subject matter expert on drones and all things uncrewed aerial. We went forth in our mission to construct a reasonable drone policy for the City of the Dalles by engaging with our partners in the police field in both Bend and Eugene, as well as with the city attorney and Mr. Davis from Columbia Gorge Community College, who's a well-renowned expert in the field. And we wanted to draft a policy that included considerations for privacy, as well as when and how the drone may be used, safety considerations, and what are prohibited uses. The policy also addresses pilot certification and training, very important to the FAA, as well as equipment types and markings and how the drone will be reported upon and what data can be captured and how it will be retained. This draft policy is included in your packet tonight. And we do sit it in this little Pelican case. It is department's loaner drone, which we are in receipt of from Columbia Gorge Community College. You'll notice it is prominently marked as a City of the Dalles Police Department drone. That's all it is. It has many functional uses in police work. Any of those or how it works or how high it can fly, I would defer to my colleagues. But I can tell you that the policy itself is well vetted. Both Bend and Eugene are at the forefront of this new and emerging technology. The policies are really well socialized and they have experience in this regard. So with that, barring any direct questions about the attached policy, I would ask for the council to endorse the draft policy. You want to go forth and socialize it amongst the community in one of a couple of different ways that I have ideas about, and then we'll return it for finalization from the council. Happy to take questions or probably.
This is under a discussion item. Was it your intent to do some, he had suggested that we pass something tonight?
Nope.
Oh, I thought I heard that.
If you give me input on the drone policy or say it's a current state, go forth and continue to develop it with the
Oh.
community and input from the community, I will do that.
Oh, great.
Or the other alternative is to like to have change or say, okay, and start over.
Okay, great.
Before we wanted to take it out to the community and gather that additional feedback, we wanted the council to first kind of weigh in and make sure that we were headed in the right direction.
Right. Okay, we'll open it up for questions from the city council. Councilor Runyon.
Stay out of the 40,000-foot area. They're being shot down lately.
Yes, sir. I don't know. This one can make it there. How high can this one go, Officer Frames?
We're restricted by the FAA to 400 feet. That can be extended if it's structured. So that's why there's above 400 feet.
Which was the end of my question. I just want to hear how high they could go. Thank you.
Things cost $10,000.
This one we have here is our trainer drone. This is the much less expensive model. Drone that we have acquired.
Oh, but you've asked for 10,000. Yeah, okay. Great. Any other, Councilor Runyon, I didn't cut you off, did I? Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, this was the drone that came from, in partnership with the Columbia Gorge Community College, correct?
Councilor McLaughlin?
I'm in support of moving forward in the community.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
What are we limited, what are we missing by not having a drone? What can't we do that we really need to do?
That's a good question. I'll take a slide and then I'll drones at arena. There was a lot of anxiety. Remember Blue Thunder, the old back in the day. And then they sort of came beyond that. And like that's sort of where we reside today. It can be used for search and rescue operations, tactical awareness, many kinds of uses like that, even like missing persons, juveniles, locate those. They have excellent night vision, so if the officer's injured in a field and don't exactly know where they are, away from the car, or even a dog that got hit and ran off into the cherry orchard, we could locate it. So many different, right?
I think the only thing you didn't touch on is crime scene reconstruction, allowed by ORS to fly at 5 days. Happened. DUI crashes, homicides, and anything really. You can reconstruct that crime scene using GPS pinpoints and creating much more.
Anybody else?
Good.
You know, when I first saw this on the agenda, I was talking to our city manager. I thought, oh, we're going to regulate drones in the city of, I know this is nothing like that, but is there any thought to something like that? I mean, yeah.
We speak to that.
Yeah.
I think how the not by us.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as Oregon law goes, specifically for law enforcement, we're one of the most restrictive states when it comes to specifically law enforcement drones, all of which is outlined in the policy. There's very certain criteria we have to meet.
Right. So I believe from what I'm gathering here, we'd like to have you continue with the process and bring it back. Is that what I'm hearing? Everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
We gather community input, sharpen the policy, and then move forward and return it to the council.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, any other business to come before the city council? We do have 5 members of the public that are still here. I'd like to recognize and compliment them for sitting through such exciting subjects as biosolids and wastewater and contracting rules and supplemental budgets and sidewalk grants and things. So thanks for sticking with us all these minutes and hours. And with that, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Getting ready, just in case.
All right.
Recording.